I'm delighted to host this new iWiSH event today. It's a series of talks from inspiring women in science and healthcare. I'm here with Zara, and we are all very, excited to have you all in the room today. So many people are joining online. So thank you so much for supporting us and be here with your presence. And so yes, we have our host online. So Dr. Joni Rutter, welcome to our iWiSH-Talks. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you all doing?
We are great. Thank you. We are just waiting. It's more than half an hour that this room has been waiting for this moment to talk with you, and we are very excited to have an inspiring conversation with you. But before we start, I would like to just quickly introduce the iWiSH-Talks to whom is new to our event. So this is our early career initiative, and our mission is to really be as a bridge, as a sort of connector between accomplished role models with early careers, so with all of us. And the idea is to really give us the opportunity to learn from their career stories, from their challenges, to ask them their questions, and to learn from their expertise. And iWiSH-Talks is a platform accessible for everyone. So please bring along your friends and colleagues whenever you come to our events. And importantly, is open to all genders. And so this is our wonderful team. I think this is the most beautiful slide on our presentation. The team is growing really, really fast, and we are so excited. Every day there are people that want to join us. So far we have more than 30 professionals, and as you can see from the picture, we this environment is really diverse. We have people with a lot of different backgrounds, skill set, and genders, and each one of them brings value, their own value on the table to shape this initiative in a really unique way. And so if you feel you would like to be involved more, we are looking for more help. So please stay with us after the talk. And an really important thing of our organization is that we are very fortunate to be supported by really great mentors who take their time, dedicate their time for us to just shape this initiative together step by step. And I really want to thank all the people on this picture one by one. And a really special thank goes to Dr. Jo Hu and Jade, which is here in the room, for their really incredible support throughout the years in all the aspects of this initiative. And so just to give you a little overview, today's event is going to be divided in two big sections. Zara and I will moderate the first Q&A sessions, and thank you for who send us also from the online audience your topics of preference, and we will make sure to cover them. And we will also then open the Q&A session for your questions, so get ready for that. And so we are really fascinated by Dr. Joni Rutter kind of career because of her multifaceted leadership skills. So Dr. Joni Rutter had her PhD in focusing on the role of cell-type specific metalloprotease, so things that a lot of us study in the lab today. And then she really decided to pursue an academic career. She obtained a fellowship at the National Career Institute, where her research was shaping around human genetics. And she then joined the National Institute of Drug Abuse, where she became the director of neuroscience division. So she started to kind of going up on the ladder of leadership. And then in 2015, she has been elected deputy director of the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, or NCATS, at NIH. And here she really works with a variety of institutions, from government and industries, non-profit patient organizations, and academia. And she really makes sure to speed research across a range of different diseases, focusing on rare disorders. She's also a really great advocate for women in science and health equity, for which she has been awarded a lot of different achievement awards. And she's also leads the NCATS Women in Science Leadership Panel. And really much congratulations, Dr. Rutter, for yesterday, a really inspiring panel. Most of us in the team were following, so we got really inspired also for the questions that we will talk today with you. And so I'd like to start with the the first question, we were really curious to understand what inspired you to make the transition between being an academic to start a role at the NIH, and how do you see the impact of your work and the mission of your work translating and changing during this switch?
Great question. Well, I had to come off mute and everything and be on the video. So sorry about that. Hi everyone. First of all, before I answer that great question, I just want to say thank you to Francisca and Zara. I met Francisca and Zara, about 6 months ago, a little less than 6 months ago, at the drug development symposium that Joe Wu runs, and I was just super impressed with these two folks who've been running the iWiSH symposium, and I was grateful to talk to them a little bit more about what you all are doing with iWiSH and the fantastic community that you have at Stanford and then beyond. How you're engaging so many people with what you're doing in terms of these iWiSH-Talks and inspiring so many people in science. So I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be here today to see you. So hi, everybody. For your talk, what inspired me originally to go from academia to what I do now at the NIH. My job at the NIH is really to oversee and administer the scientific directions that we have at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, or NCATS. I'll refer to NCATS a lot because it's a lot easier to say than the whole title. But what made me transition primarily was the idea of moving. I started my postdoc actually at NCI, the National Cancer Institute, and that's also at the NIH. And so essentially, I never really left. I came to do my postdoc at the NIH and stayed because I really am enamored by, and still am to this day, the mission that we have at the NIH. It's to study the basic sciences and to move them into health solutions. And to me, that is a fantastic mission to have. And I've always just very much aligned with that. At what we do at NCATS takes it a little bit further. Our mission is to actually not do the basic sciences. We focus on understanding what those the findings are from the basic science, and pull them through the translational science space to get them into health solutions, to bring therapies to people, to think about what kinds of treatments we can bring forward, whether those be behavioral treatments, digital health treatments, or therapeutic treatments. So that's really our role here. And I guess I was very inspired by the idea that at the NIH, in the role of being sort of an administrator of science, it doesn't sound very sexy, right? But what it allows you to do is take a really big look at the big picture of what's happening in the scientific space that you're interested in helping to pursue. And so for me, what we do a lot at NCATS is that we focus on translational science. There's not a disease or a specific organ that we function or that we really think about. We focus on all disease areas and all organs. And our idea is that if we can find the right way to help multiple diseases, that's what we want to focus on. So platform-based approaches to help translate those scientific findings into health solutions faster, better, more effectively, and more efficiently. And I want to just give you an example of this just to kind of capture your imagination. And that is that there are over 10,000 rare diseases. There's probably 20 to 30,000 diseases all told. But 10,000 of those, over 10,000 of those, are rare diseases. Now, these rare diseases, they are, people who are fewer than 200,000 people within the United States have a disease like this. Most of them are fewer than 100 people, and many of them are fewer than 10. So very rare diseases. And these rare diseases are sort of they're not really commercially viable to make therapeutics for. A drug company is not going to make a lot of money for developing a treatment for 10 people in the world. So that means that it is an unmet need. And so rare diseases in general are unmet needs. There aren't going to be a lot of people who are working on them. So if we can think about ways that can help de-risk others to bring them into work on focusing on rare diseases, then that is a win for us. And so one of the ways that we're thinking about it is, so for example, 10,000 rare diseases, there are only, maybe a couple hundred mechanisms that cause those diseases. So for example, you can have a mutation in a gene that causes a disease, or you can have a protein that doesn't fold right that causes a disease, or you can have exon skipping that causes a disease. So these are the mechanisms underlying how those diseases manifest. And there aren't as many of those as there are diseases. So if we can figure out how to fix those mechanisms, then we can impact many thousands of diseases faster. And that is sort of an example of how we think about how to approach science from our perspective. So for me, really looking at the big picture helps you take a step back and imagine, where can you wield a little bit more creativity and thinking about how to do something a little bit differently than the way that science is done now. And being sort of the administrator of science, taking a look at what everybody is doing across the country and even in the world, even, you have a chance to really think about that. So that is what inspired me to be more of sort of the administrator side, to use my scientific brain to really think about how we can, at a higher level, kind of help direct the places that we go in science.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rutter. I think this gives us a very, very nice and broad perspective, especially for all the early careers who are here preparing their next grant applications and hopefully in future applying to NCATS, to your program. So since we're talking about translational science, could we also talk about the main challenges in translational science you and other team members are facing, or maybe other teams in academia and also in industry, and how these challenges changing over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are so many challenges, you all. And first and foremost is it's very difficult to really maintain a stable sort of budget and how we can affect all of these different areas. And so part of the time is how do we make sure we develop our priorities and stick to those priorities, be very disciplined and be very strategic in how we think about those priorities. So our budget is $928 million at NCATS. 70% of the budget, 70%, is dedicated to a program that is across the country to support the infrastructure of a clinical and translational science awards. And Stanford is amongst those. We have a few over 60 CTSAs. These are the Clinical and Translational Science Awards. Ruth O'Hara, if any of you know Ruth, she is your CTSA PI for the CTSA at Stanford. Joe Wu also is a part of this program as well as a few others. That's sort of the program that NCATS, it's the biggest flagship program at the NIH, let alone at NCATS. And so again, 70% of that $928 million budget that NCATS has. That leaves a little over $300 million for NCATS to support all of the other areas that we do. We have a drug development partnership program. We have an Office of Strategic Initiatives. We have special initiatives. We have a division of rare disease research innovations. And then we have our preclinical innovations, which is our intramural program, our intramural labs. So we have the remaining budget to help support those activities. Now, what that means too, I mentioned a little bit about rare diseases. That means we have $150 million to focus on rare diseases. the 10,000 rare diseases. So again, we have to be very strategic and very disciplined in how we really think about putting a laser focus on how we spend that money on those particular areas. And that's why, we really want to do things that can help raise all boats for those diseases. Because really, when you think about $150 million focusing on rare diseases, and then the 10,000 rare diseases, let's do the math. You guys are at Stanford, you're really smart, so you can do the math for me. But I think it's about $15,000 per disease. That's not a lot. So that's why we have to be very strategic and laser focused on what we do. So that also means that the largest area of activity that we have is around the CTSA program, so that clinical and translational science area, and working through the CTSA program, where we have training awards and case scholar awards where we support through that program. So that would be one of those areas where, if you're connected with the CTSA program at Stanford or any other area where you're working, ask about the training awards, ask about the K awards, and how you can get involved in translational science. That would be the best way to really think about how to get involved more in the NCATS work. Now, in the rare disease space, we do have smaller programs. We don't necessarily have T or K awards just because we don't have the budget to allow it. But we have small RO3 awards, for example, R21 awards that we have in these spaces that can help also support early career investigators too.
That's great. Thank you so much for giving such a thorough overview. That's very helpful for all of us to understand the mechanism behind, right, the selection and how you guys envision where this funding support goes. And I'd like to follow up on the kind of topic of navigating challenges. And as mentioned earlier, you have an important role as a sort of connector between multiple institutions, which obviously they have their own view about healthcare needs and the issues that we are facing. So how do you manage the expectation from the public, the scientific community, and the government when you make decisions?
Yeah, it's an important question. Thank you for showing that picture, by the way. That was a picture of another CTSA program at the University of Kansas, which is my home state. Kansas is my home state. I'm from Kansas. And so I had the fortunate luck to be invited to go to the University of Kansas with Senator Moran and Senator Blunt at the time. And so Senator Moran is the senator from Kansas. Senator Blunt is from Missouri. But because Kansas kind of straddles Kansas and Missouri, both senators actually came with me for that visit. And the way that we work within the NIH is we're not able to advocate for ourselves. We work within the government. So if senators ask us to brief them, that's the best way that we can interact with senators and Congress people within our government. And so, and they do, and they will. They'll ask us for to come talk to them about what we're doing. But we're not able to go ahead and go to them and tell them what we'd like to do. That's sort of considered lobbying, and we don't lobby. So one of the things that we do in how we manage those expectations is, well, I'm going to give you an example of what we did for our strategic plan at NCATS. We just finalized our strategic plan. If you hadn't had a chance to take a look at our strategic plan, please do so. It's on our website. You can type in NCATS strategic plan, you'll go right to it. But the way that we approached that strategic plan was to engage all of our communities. I held over 40, 45, 46 roundtable discussions with the public, with patients, with patient advocates, with our CTSA PIs, with their deans, with the CTSA K scholars, T scholars, early career folks, with the training award people, the K award people. I held listening sessions with our rare disease community, with industry, with members of the academic organizations and community, with biotech. And then if those roundtables weren't enough, we also did a request for information to tell people what we were thinking, and people could write in to us to let us know, what they liked about what we were thinking, and what they didn't like, or what they think we should focus. So part of it in sort of thinking about how we prioritize, it's, to me, very important to understand what the community is thinking. I might have my own ideas, but they could be really, they may not be great. And if I'm not talking to people about my ideas, then I'm not getting that sort of, well, that might work, that might not work. Here's where you're not thinking in the right way. What if have you thought about this? Maybe try it this way. So rather than having those own machinations in my head, or just even people at NCATS, I want to hear from the community. And so that's what we really embarked on, was holding listening sessions. We engaged over 1,000 people during these listening sessions. We received over 1,700 unique comments regarding our strategic plan, and we incorporated them in our strategic plan. So listening to the community, what they're thinking, not just the scientific community, but the patient community, is really important. And I think that engagement helped ensure that what we were thinking in terms of the strategic plan for our scientific goals would be inclusive of thinking about what the community is going to need, how they can help ensure that we're successful in achieving those goals. So talking to people in what you're doing, to me, was the most valuable part of how we prioritize essentially what we're thinking. So setting those expectations, if you incorporate those discussions with the community, then everyone is in line with what those expectations are. And not only that, they can buy into helping you meet those expectations, or they might understand where, we failed on this one. That science is about failure, and we're not going to hit everything that we say that we're going to do. So, but if we have the community along with us, if we're transparent about those ideas, then failure is okay, because we're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to move forward, because now we know what not to do. So now we figure out how to move forward together. So I think working with the public to help make a transparency around that, working with the scientific community to understand that we're all aligned in directions that we want to sort of row together on, and with our federal partners too. We work hand in hand with a lot of our federal partners, and so we've also engaged them in these discussions as well. So that's, I think, the primary way in how we're able to manage those expectations, is just making sure that we talk to people, we're transparent about what we're doing, and then we engage them to help us be successful, because we don't do this alone. This is all about team science.
Thank you, Dr. Rutter. Just before we move on to more advice-related questions to early careers, one more structural question is that, can you tell us what are the key strategies you have in place to reduce bias? It could be conflict of interest, or it could be racial and gender bias with the applications to the applications to NCATS.
Yeah, thank you for that. So a lot of the applications that we have are quite big. Like I mentioned, the CTSA programs, and so what we look for there within the applications themselves is that we want to make sure that they're inclusive of not just the communities that they're reaching out to for the key scientific areas that they're doing clinical trials on. For example, if you're doing clinical trials on, let's just say, sickle cell, and your community is really a population, a rich population in a very sort of homogeneous community that is not African American, you're kind of going down the wrong area. And so I think that we look to make sure that you're proposing solutions that are important for your communities, whatever communities those are, and there should be many of them. If people don't have the disease or area you're working on the wrong community. You're working with the wrong community. So engaging the communities, understanding from them what their interests are within the communities is incredibly important. So another key area here is again working to to talk to people about that, and understanding from your communities what's so important. In terms of applications, and sort of bias or gender bias, what we're seeing in terms of gender bias is, and I don't know if it's a bias per se, it's certainly a trend, but we see a lot of women early on in the pipeline of career development. But then later in their careers, there is a leaky pipeline, especially for women, especially for minorities. And so that's an area that we want to try to help support. So we have diversity supplements, for example, re-entry supplements for women and minorities, to make sure that they have a way to help transition within their careers. And that's what we hope that those will help to do. I'll say too that, I think mentoring is really important. If you have mentors who can help you, guide you in this, talk to them about if you're struggling to get a grant, or if you're struggling to figure out what your aims are. Talk to your peers, talk to your mentors about this, and they can help you also make sure your application is as strong as possible. But I think that we need everybody at the table. Science. I said this yesterday. Science thrives when we have every voice at the table. So, and we need science to thrive. So you belong in science, and this is a way that we can help each other sort of make sure that you have every opportunity available to continue your great work that you're doing in science, and continue to move along in your careers.
Thank you so much. That's so inspirational, really. And you talked about a lot of these soft skills, working with the community, listening, and to really, proceed all together. And because there are so many early careers in the room, but also I see joining online from several institutions, I can see. So we would like to know what are in your opinion, the ways in which early careers can develop a translational mindset, and what are the specific skill set that NIH looks for successful grants that are in addition to having a good publication record.
Oh, right. A publication record. That's good. It's good. I'm of the mindset that it's sometimes it's not just the publication record; it's that you're first author on the publications, right? And again, that's good. But at NCATS, we want to see you. We don't care where you are in your publication record. We want to see you working in a team. We want to see you bringing in different ways of thinking, interdisciplinary kinds of approaches to solving a problem. Because if you just start focusing on a problem with one approach, yes, that's going to help. But if you have multiple approaches on the problem, then you're going to have a better chance at success. And so for us at NCATS, we really look for team science activities. Now that's a little bit different than the rest of the NIH. So it kind of depends on what you're really thinking about, and you have to be mindful about, what is the award mechanism that you're applying to. What is in your university? What does it mean to get promotion and tenure in your university? Those are things that you have to pay attention to, because at NCATS we're focused on the scientific problem, and we want to make sure that we have the best minds at the table, using multidisciplinary approaches to help solve those problems. And that goal is a little bit different than what your institution's goals are for you in terms of your career development. So you kind of have to pay attention to both of those things. That's important. But in terms of publications, again, that's good. But I think there are other areas where you can also ensure that you are you're very competitive, and you're very focused on the key problems that you're working on. So some of the things that we think about in terms of key principles around translational science are, I mentioned already before, that this idea of focusing on unmet needs. Why are you studying the question that you're studying? Is it just because your mentor is doing it? Is it because there's is it because that you have a new why as to why you're addressing this? What is your why? That's, I think, a key question that you have to answer for yourself in thinking about it. And so you have to think about what those scientific needs are and contribute to research advances in those investigated areas. That, I think, will provide those unique challenges and will resonate with reviewers because it's very clear as to why you're studying what you're studying and you know what your why is. It also helps us advance research to develop solutions for people with unmet needs. And that is again, as I mentioned, it's a big goal that we need to do. I guess another way that I would think about it too is unmet needs and generalizable solutions. That's sort of the other side of the coin. But you want to make sure that you're advancing research by testing solutions to common bottlenecks. How are you advancing the field of science? And if you can provide a solution to that, that is another thing that reviewers are going to look for. But then you have to really clearly articulate how you're going to answer that question. How are they going to be sure that based on what you've proposed, that you will find this new way of perhaps breaking down a bottleneck of science that we have, or impacting perhaps a new treatment or a cure for a rare disease. So these are also very important. There is an emphasis on creativity and innovation. But sometimes, sometimes you don't have to be super innovative to solve a problem. There are still many areas of science where, maybe 2D cell cultures are actually, they're good if you're looking at a very specific question. But to get at more maybe predictability of how a drug might work in the human body, you might need a better model. And so is a mouse a better model? Maybe. Maybe there are human physiological cell-based, iPS cell-based systems that might be better models. So thinking about how you're going to innovate on that and how you can convince the reviewers that that's the way to go. That's going to be the most predictive way to answer your question. So it's really communicating to the reviewer why you're doing this work, how it's going to impact the question, and then why that creativity is going to be really needed here. And sometimes you have to take a step back. Sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm going to be super creative here, but I'm going to use the tried and true method, and then I'm going to show you what we do in this new method. And that way you are, you're really answering the question in ways that this is how we've always done it, but we're convinced this is going to be a better way. And so you don't just go in and say, this is the new way, this is the way to do it. But if you can do the experiment to show it, that could be helpful too. So thinking about how you integrate the knowledge that has come before to what is going to go next, that's a real opportunity for us. And that's what's going to advance the science the most. And in fact, this is what we do with the FDA all the time. We work hand in hand with the FDA, but sometimes we're not sure what the needs are for the FDA to bring a new therapeutic to the table for IND enabling studies. Sometimes we're not quite sure what they might be looking for in a particular package that we're developing. So we call them and we ask for a meeting to talk about it. And that helps us know what they're going to be looking for and also what we need to make sure that we're including so that we can meet the needs of what they're going to be looking for. And so that's one of those things where you can, this is what we've done the old way, this is the new way. You can show proof of principle that the new way works. And that was a lesson that I have from the FDA too. I think the other soft skill kind of idea is to develop partnerships with your peers, your collaborators. What does that partnership look like? That can be, across government, industry, government, academia, etc. But those people bring varied expertise, and that varied expertise again brings that interdisciplinary approach to solving a challenge. And so I think that's another key area is ensuring that you're building those team networks to ensure that, first of all, you have people around you to say, have you thought about this way? This may not work. I've tried this already in my lab. It doesn't work. Or I've tried this in my lab and it does work. Those are the kinds of conversations that you can have. So enabling those ideas and working with others, that team science-based approach is really important. And be bold. I think that when you're writing your first grants, certainly you don't want to be too bold. You don't want to, say you're going to solve problems that nobody's solved before. But unless you have a really good way of getting there, but it's it's being bold in, again, sort of communicating the why, communicating how you're going to talk about your particular problem, how you're going to approach your problem, and communicating very well to the reviewers why this is important bit of work to advance the field. So those are some things that I would relay in terms of those soft skills.
Thank you so much. And now I think we are ready to start our Q&A from the audience online and here in the room. And we really liked all the pictures that we found online, by the way, Dr. Joni Rutter. Okay, so we can pass the microphone on Zara.
Hi, Dr. Rutter. I'm an instructor at Stanford. Thank you for sharing your great suggestions. I have two questions. The first is, we know the NIH and also in NCAT, we have so many grant opportunities for well-established independent scientists. So I'm wondering, do you have any for the dependent scientists, like they still postdocs, they still need mentorship? For example, I know we have the F-32, but it's only for the American citizens. So is there any possibility or opportunities for the international postdocs other than K99? Is for late stage. So I mean for the early stage postdocs.
For early stage postdocs, again, part of those things for us are going to be through the CTSA program, through the postdocs and pre-doc T programs there. So we don't even support F fellowships. We don't support F30s, F31s, or F32s. So what I would recommend is that, and I'm gonna put this link in the chat. There's a wonderful resource through NIAID that I reference quite a lot too. I hope everybody can see the chat. Can everybody see the chat?
No, but I think if you put it in the chat, we can forward to
You'll forward it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'll forward this here. So basically this is a resource for you to perhaps look at. It talks a little bit about how you think about grant applications and apply to them, but it also gives you some career development grant opportunities. And depending on where you're from and what you're interested in, what the eligibility criteria are for those grants. So I would recommend looking at those that resource as a way in which you can to find out more about that process. Each institute is different in terms of how they support these different mechanisms. NCATS is really unique in this regard because of the nature of what we do within our clinical and translational science awards. It's a line item in our budget, so we are not able to have a lot of flexibility in how we support that. So we're really defined by what that particular line item can allow us to do. So that's why it's very difficult for us to even be more expansive into early career phases. But the CTSA program also provides opportunities for a variety of early career investigators to get involved through that process. And so it's less independent and more dependent on those activities, but it's a way to continue to get you more closer to that independence that you're seeking. The other area you mentioned, international fellows, for example. The other area I would highly recommend you taking a look at is the Fogarty International Center, and they provide resources as well for early career investigators and opportunities there. So I will find the link for the Fogarty International Center too, and I'll put that in the chat that you can then forward.
Thank you so much for sharing this resource. My second question is regarding what are the key focus areas that the NCACs will be investing, I would say, in the next few years. So how can we like early careers can align our work with these aims? Thank you.
Ah, great question. That's super exciting. I found the link. I'm putting it in the chat. So sorry, you can forward that on. Yeah, you know, I think so. We have a strategic plan at NCATS, and in fact, if you're aligned with a disease or organ mission and you're working in a specific area that may not be NCATS specific, but it might be another institute or center at the NIH, I would highly recommend you going to that particular website of the NIH Institute and Center, reviewing the opportunities there and reviewing their strategic plan. What are they going to prioritize? And I say that because the way I would answer this question is that I would say to align with the NCATS mission, I'd encourage you to take a look at our strategic plan. We use our strategic plan as the North Star of the priorities that we have. And so our strategic plan is we basically have 5 key goal areas. The first goal is to identify more treatments. How can we bring more treatments onto the scene for a variety of different diseases? So under that goal, we think about things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. How can we use AI and ML to identify potential new therapeutic development processes for particular diseases? How do we think about ensuring that we don't just continue to make molecules that might be available for common diseases, but we think about where are the real struggles that we're having in bringing more treatments to the table. So, for example, 90% of our biology is undruggable right now. We don't have the technologies to drug those areas of our biology. We can't reach them very well. We don't know how to reach them. We don't have the right tools and technologies. But that's starting to change now. Some of those are more coming to light. And for example, we have the Nobel Prize winners this year are really focused on AI and ML and drug development. And so we can think about how to use those technologies of using these large language models and predicting sort of drug development based on a binding pocket, for example, in a particular protein that we've never been able to access before. So these are some of those promising areas where we think we can advance in identifying ways to bring more treatments to people. So that's goal number 1. Goal number 2 is we want to make sure that we're doing this for all people. So as I said before, we need to be engaging the communities out there to understand what the needs are. We need to make sure that we're reaching all populations, gender, sex, and different races and ethnicities as well. It's important to understand all of that to ensure that we're understanding, the diseases that are important for those populations too, and ensure that we're including all of them in what we're thinking about. And then the third goal is more quickly. How do we move things through the pipeline more quickly? So even if we can find ways of developing drugs and using these, AI technologies, for example, that's great. But if we can't move them through the pipeline quick, then we're not doing ourselves any good service here. So how do we think about translating all of these things across the pipeline? It takes about 10 to 15 years to move from a particular molecule or assay to move that through the pipeline to get it into the clinic. And then it can take even longer to get it in the medicine cabinet. So it's a long time to do this kind of work. So how we need to think about it is what can make it go faster? Well, we've used rodent models for a long time to study drug development. And we have a 90% failure rate of the candidates that move through the preclinical pipeline. They get into phase 1 clinical trials. Maybe they're okay and they move on. But phase 2, they start to fail. Phase 3, they fail again. So there's a big failure rate in that clinical trial space. So we think we're doing a good job on the preclinical side, but we are not. We have to change our approaches. To do that, how can we build better predictive models in the preclinical side that will help us predict what's going to happen in the clinical side? And again, this goes back to the first 2 questions or the first 2 goals. We're building more treatments, great, for all people. We have to make sure that those models are inclusive of a variety of different populations. So that's one of the ways that we think we can move more quickly down the road. And this is important because when I keep talking about rare diseases, rare diseases take about 7 or so years on average to get diagnosed. So we actually have to move faster on how we actually diagnose rare diseases, because a 7-year window in a rare disease is a long time. And people with diseases, these are debilitating diseases, they will reach severity much earlier on in that time window. And then so the longer it takes us to get through there, the more severe the disease is, and we're not going to be able to impact it as much. So the earlier we can get that diagnosis, the more it's going to help us innovate on those therapeutic developments, the faster we can get treatments to people. So those are some of the things that we talk about. Our fourth goal is really cross-cutting. These aren't done in a vacuum. The first 3 priorities aren't done in a vacuum. So there's cross-connectivity there. Areas like data science, for example, are really incredibly important for each of those activities. And so data science really underpins a lot of the first 3 goals. And so that's one of those mechanisms that's cross-cutting. We have a big focus on data science and understanding how we can build data models, how we can understand how to extract information from data models using knowledge graphs, for example. These are important new tools that we have in our armamentarium. And then the 5th goal is really being champions and stewards of the translational science approaches that we have. So this whole idea of using translational science and building platform-based approaches that can raise all boats as opposed to looking at one disease at a time. This is an opportunity for us in that goal to really champion what we do in the translational science areas and support the team science-based approaches that I've talked about, those sort of soft skills that I've talked about and what makes a good translational scientist. These are really important areas. But also thinking about these operational sides of things too, policy development, how we generate contracts for the important work we do. Contracts can take years, a year or more to complete. That's way too long. Why are these operational hurdles so big? How can we move a little bit more quickly on making sure that we can get contracts in place to do what we need to do? Agreements with entities, different parties also take a long time. I think this is just a really big disservice to science. We need to think about how we can get to agreements faster. So again, thinking about the why we're doing it, what are the roles and responsibilities of who's involved in the project, that can help us get to those agreements, those contracting, those operational pieces a lot faster. So these are the kinds of things that we're talking about in our strategic plan.
Thank you, Dr. Rutter. It's really great to hear from you. I would like to ask something not related with the funding, but more about personal question. Like during your career, in your scientific career, was there a challenging moment that initially was like really challenged you, but then later appeared to have a very positive impact and contribute actually to your success later?
Yes, there are many of those challenging moments. A lot of challenging moments. Let me rephrase that. There were a lot of challenging moments, you all. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. But as you very well put it in your question, they made me stronger, I think. It made me learn, made me understand what was important a little bit more. And so I would never trade in those challenging moments. I think they're incredibly important. Don't be afraid of failure. You will fail. There is no question in my mind that you will fail. But because you're failing, you know what not to do, and you will succeed the next time. You might fail again, but again, keep going because you're going to get there. One of the examples in my career that I tend to talk about is before I took my postdoc after my graduate school training, I really wanted to go into the FBI. I wanted to be a forensic scientist, a DNA forensic scientist. This was a long time ago. So that was kind of the new thing in DNA technology is how it could be used for forensics. And so I applied to the FBI to do that. And I didn't hear anything for 9 months. So during that 9 months, I was like, oh my goodness, they must hate me, or, I don't know what's going on. It sounded like this was a big area. They're trying to hire a bunch of people, but I wasn't hearing anything. So I started to apply for postdocs. And I got a postdoc almost immediately at the National Cancer Institute, for example. That's where I started. And so, but I saw that first as a failure because clearly I didn't have what was needed to get into the FBI. So I thought I had failed. What happened was, though, right when I signed that I was going to go to NCI for my postdoc, I got a letter from the FBI saying, "Hey, we're ready for you. Come on down. We'd love to talk to you about this. Let us know." So again, 9 months later, this happened. So then I said, "Sorry, I have this great opportunity at NIH and I'm going to go there." So I came to the NIH. And then the first thing I realized was that I was a fellow, so I wasn't really an employee yet, but I was working within the NIH and in the federal government. And I understood almost immediately that why it took 9 months for the FBI to get back to me, because it takes a long time in these hiring circles in the government. It just takes time. So it wasn't anything to do with me, but I certainly internalized it. Oh my goodness, I don't have the right skills or something. So to me, I thought I had failed in that regard because I didn't get my dream job. But then I got my postdoc at NCI and realized that it was my dream job. That was my dream job. I got to continue to work in the field of genomics and studying cancer. And that really set the stage for how I moved on from there. So it was a feeling of failure, but ultimately a triumph. I'll say the other thing, though, that when I was in my postdoc at the NCI, I was coming in to do a project on looking at BRCA1 and 2 genes for breast and ovarian cancer. And I was ready to do all of the DNA work that I needed to do. And I come into the lab and they told me that the work that I was going to be doing was on an HPLC machine to study DNA. We had, I thought, much better technologies than an HPLC machine. But the lab had an HPLC machine to do this. And I've never worked on an HPLC machine. I did sequencing, I did a lot of gels, a lot of northern blots, a lot of southern blots. I had no idea what an HPLC machine was going to do for me in genomics. Sure, they do great things for a lot of other stuff, but for genomics, well, it turns out it was okay, but there were much simpler ways to get at the question. So ultimately, that was a big challenge for me because this is the technology that we kind of bought into, but ultimately I had to convince people that there are other ways to do it. And so it served as a nice sort of way to negotiate for yourself, to say, actually, there might be a better way of doing this, cheaper and better way of doing this. And, if you stick to the why of what you're doing and argue your case, then ultimately that's what's going to happen. So we ultimately changed our approaches and, and was a successful postdoc. And I got to work and meet so many wonderful people in that program as a fellow at the NCI. And so after that, I switched from the bench labs because I kind of thought too, maybe, well, if technology is kind of moving in this direction, technology keeps changing and you got to keep up. That's for sure. But maybe I was more interested really in the big picture of how to move science. And so after my postdoc, I went to the extramural environment to be more involved in programmatic development and more sort of thinking about how to push the directions of science at that sort of higher level. It's sort of the best kept secret, I think, of the NIH is that we have these program directors who sort of really think about these key questions and help drive the science in that way. But it's the bench people who do it. The bench people the scientists who are working in wet labs and at computers, and computational biology too, all of that work, that's what proves it. That's what makes it real. And so it's this partnership between the scientific administration with the research community that is really so powerful. And so that to me, I think is really that partnership is really what has contributed to I think my success, if I can call it success, it is recognizing that it's not me who's moving this. It's all of us who are really looking at these problems in ways that we can help give answers that are going to be helpful.
Thank you so much. So other questions from the audience?
Yeah, thank you so much for the insights and also for sharing your failures. Now, you talked a lot about this beginning stage of your career, but you also mentioned the leaky pipeline. So how after that, a lot of women just don't continue, don't kind of fall out of the pipeline and don't make it to the top. And now you are a woman in a very high role. Could you maybe comment on like obstacles you face, challenges, maybe also challenges you're still facing now you are in that role, maybe some pushback that you experienced and how you overcame that?
Yeah, it's a really important question. In a way, I feel very lucky in my career. Even though I was, sort of in genomics and genetics, it is still a male-dominated area, but I never felt I always felt welcome in the community. I didn't feel like that was an issue for me. Luckily, that's not the same though for all different careers. And I think too, it's something for me. My partner knows that work is fun for me. I work a lot. We don't have kids, so that was a conscious choice though, and that's not for everybody, but it was for me. And so I was, really just wanted to make sure that what I do was going to be meaningful for me. And I am lucky to have a partner who also thinks that. So that's also very helpful. And I have a family who's very supportive. So I think in that regard, I haven't run into a lot of challenges in terms of what I was willing to do for my career. And again, that's not for everybody. There are also many of my colleagues, and if you haven't had a chance to hear the Women in Science symposium that we did yesterday, I would encourage you to listen to it, especially panel 2 for your specific question, because we have all different kinds of women who are represented there. And one of them said, look, I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon, I'm a researcher, I'm an administrator. She says, but most importantly, I'm a mom. And, that to her, that was something that was very important to her life that she wanted to make sure that she made room for. And so I think that, it's a very personal question. And it takes everyone, really to think about what it is that will make you feel successful, especially in your careers. And, I think that's part of that leaky pipeline aspect and why we want to help support that. We want you to have it all. If you want to be a researcher, you want to be an administrator, you want to be a surgeon or a doctor, yes. If you want to be a mom or a dad, yes. We want to make room for what you want and need to do. So that's what I would say is really important. It's really a very personal question for you. But I think there's room for everybody.
Thank you so much. I think there was another question. I saw some other hands on. I also, Dr. Joni Rutter, I also took the freedom to put in the chat the, right? So people can see, you guys can watch online. It was a really inspiring 2 hours of full immersion with so many women in different leadership field. So very welcome to watch the recording.
Including an astronaut
Yes.
who joined us for the discussion. She was amazing. So yeah, it was really an amazing event. So I encourage you to take a look. By the way, she was the astronaut who worked on Joe Woo's cardio cells in the space station. So there's a connection with Stanford with her. Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Rutter. It was great listening to you. So I want to ask you, what does NCATS or NIH envision about international research funding? Like, we come from very various countries where we have a lot of data, and we're kind of limited to US when it comes to using our data sets, and we want to take these things back, sometimes maybe by being here or maybe by going back. But does NCAT see themselves as an organization funding that ever?
So most of our funding stays in the U.S. largely, again, through the clinical the CTSA program, the Clinical and Translational Science Awards program. 70% of our budget is to that. That's over 60 academic medical institutions across the country and their partners. So that's where the bulk of our funding goes to. We don't have a lot of funding otherwise to use for support in many other areas, and that's why we have to be super strategic with the little money that we have remaining for other areas that we do support. So that's why I would say that for international questions around funding, the Fogarty International Center at the NIH would be probably the key place to connect with in terms of opportunities for funding for international programs. That said, we partner with international groups all the time. We have students who come from other countries who do postdocs within our labs, for example. And so I would love to figure out ways in which we could potentially do some fellowships with other countries. But it's not always so straightforward, and we want to make sure that other countries are going to support the applicants or the awardees when the funding is over. And part of that understanding to make sure that there's room for that support is to have skin in the game for both countries. And so that's one of those areas where we're, would help, I think, understanding that there's a way to make sure that other countries will support the activities also. And so what that would mean, I think, could be very flexible. But, these are some of the areas where, I think we could definitely look into.
That's great. Thank you so much for all the really inspirational discussions around so many topics, from directions of NCATS at NIH till grant opportunities and developing translational science, and also importantly these soft skills to make us as researchers better leaders for the future, right? And so I think we can just ask you one last question, which it's probably the more fun question that we have usually for our speakers, and this would be after this experience with us here at the iWiSH, and also I'd like to mention that Dr. Joni Rutter accepted to be advisor in our board of the iWiSH. The team already knows that, but just for the audience online, so we are so grateful for your time and this really strong support to make us growing more. And so the last question that we have is, if you would like to share with us your experience in just one word, what this word would be?
Fun. It was fun. It's also, I'm going to say a few words. It's inspiring. Your questions are really good. Seeing you all in the room on the video cast, seeing all the people online, I'm inspired by, you're already ahead of the game because you're talking to one another, and you're learning about sort of what it means to advance it here. So I want to say thank you. I had a lot of fun doing this.
Thank you so much. And we would like to really thank you. And I'd like to share with also the audience online that, guys, we are on socials. We have Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. So please feel free to follow us to know more about our future events in 2025. This was our last, but we have a very nice, exciting more talks later on in next year. And to conclude, before we do a nice selfie with the speaker, I really would like to thank our main supporters and sponsors, which is the Stanford Cardiovascular Institute, the SARPAS postdoctoral association here at Stanford, as well as Protein Tech. So we have Andrew outside of the room waiting with a lot of donuts and coffee. So guys, please stop by before you go to your lab and work and grab some more coffee and sugar. And BioRender, and we have Erica joining online. So thank you so much. And Dr. Joni Rutter, we have one last question for you. Well, one last request. We would love to make a selfie with you, and we prepared these nice thank you cards, which are very genetic cards. If you can see also these nips here, right? So it's a rare disorder thank you card.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, right? So I don't know. So guys, if we can, as we usually do, go on the other side, and maybe the team can come.
There you go. Okay.
I love the creativity.
Okay, great. Give a round of applause. It has been so fun having you here with us and sharing all the beautiful experiences. So we will for sure get in touch with you to arrange our next advisory meeting. And we wish you a beautiful, wonderful day, evening. Day. Still, it's afternoon, right? Yes.
It is. It's all
So,
good.
Thank you so much.
Same to you. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Take care.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you soon.